There's also something quintessentially American, quintessentially liberal in it, in that you get to choose your own identity. So in America, it's perfectly acceptable to convert to Judaism or to convert to atheism or to become gay. Like, you get to, choose your identity. That's like a very American thing, like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So in British culture, if you watch British drama, it's much more about learning your obligations. And in America, it's much more about following your bliss, like discovering who you really are. And so there's something like quintessentially American in this trans mania. And then there's something quintessentially liberal in that liberalism holds that we have we have kind of a Buffett identity. So I'm not liberal, I'm much more medieval. So I feel like if there's something going on in the next house, let's say there is consensual incest between adults going on in the next house, that bothers me. I feel like that harms me. Gay marriage, I feel like it harms me. Doing away with the ban on out homosexuals in the military, I feel harms me because I have a conception of the armed forces being a heterosexual institution. So I don't feel like I live in a Buffett identity. I feel like everything that's going on around me is penetrating me and it affects me. But liberalism, developed really out of the Protestant Christianity, is much more of a Buffett identity where you have autonomous strategic individuals, rationally making up their minds about what is true and good and beautiful and how they want to lead their life. As someone who's much more medieval, I'm much more skeptical of the powers of human reason. I don't think that people are primarily buffered, strategic, autonomous individuals making, rational choices. So it comes back to these two fundamental ways of experiencing the world. So think about back in the 16th century. If you're a lord, you're the lord of your manor, and you could break wind, you could belch, you could say whatever you wanted at your dinner table. Then when the social political circumstances changed so that you needed to be at court to maintain your status, you couldn't belch at court. You couldn't say whatever you wanted. You had to measure everything you said at court with how would it affect someone. Were you appropriately deferential? You would have to be constantly attuned to what was going on at court. So liberals have much more of a court identity. They want us to be constantly attuned to what's going on for other people. How will that make the retarded feel? How will that make the transgendered feel? How will that make homosexuals feel? How will that make black people or Jews feel? So it's a court morality. People who are not liberal have much more of a traditional way of approaching life. So it's much more of a sense that, we're all, kind of lord of the manor in our own home, and therefore we can say what we want. We can belch if we want to. We don't have to weigh all our utterances up against how they affect other people.
A very interesting way of putting it. I had not thought of that distinction which you made between manorial and court morality, but that is a very fascinating way of putting it, no question. Now, I think, as we obviously are beginning to wind things down here, unfortunately, it does beg the question of why the left is simply so appealing to so many people, whereas the right is not. Because if you look at, like I said, this explosion in left-wing politics among young women over the last very few years, obviously there's an appeal that the left has that the right doesn't. And I don't know exactly what this appeal is, but I think perhaps Luke might have some thoughts on the matter. Anything to share?
Yeah, the left dominates all our major institutions. So if you go to university, of course, it'll make your life a lot easier if you're on the left. If you're in any of the professions, your life will be a lot easier if you're on the left. If you're interested in media or you simply like to watch TV, your life will be a lot easier on your left. It does you harm. It's painful if you're not on the left and you watch TV and movies, because everything that you hold to be sacred is frequently urinated on. So conservatives understandably feel a sense of cultural oppression, and Ronnie Goodman wrote a great book on this, on the conservative case for cultural oppression. He's a man of the left, but he uses left-wing analyses to show the legitimate reasons why conservatives feel oppressed in America. So it's not the explicit ideological appeal of the left, it's that the left dominates our institutions, it dominates how we are supposed to speak. You're going to be much more effective working in a corporation if you're on the left, because you have internalized that court, way of being, where you're constantly measuring what you say to, how it affect. You're going to do much more effectively in, navigating life among America's major institutions if you take on this strategic, autonomous, buffered sense of self, where it doesn't matter, if the neighbors have a gay marriage, or if the neighbor has trans children. It doesn't matter, because you have this buffered, strategic, autonomous sense of self where we can all just rationally make our choices, and you look down on ignorance and traditional superstitions and folkways. So given that the incentives are strongly aligned with every thinking person, facing many more incentives to be on the left than the right, it doesn't surprise me at all.
Now, there is the question of why this impacts women, at least very recently, more than men, this attraction to the left in the US. Any ideas as to why that might be?
Yeah, because women have always been much more sensitive to social feedback. So women are far less likely to color outside the lines. So women have always done better than boys in school. But if you ask teachers and professors who their best students are, it's almost always guys, because women are always very careful to color inside the lines in school. They want to meet the approval of the teacher. They don't want to fall out of fashion with other people. And so women are particularly attuned to, the left runs all our institutions. It is socially unacceptable to say anything racist, sexist, transphobic, Islamophobic. They pick up these cues, and they have much more of a court morality. Women constantly moderate what they say by what could be the implications on other people. Men are much more likely to belch, to fart, and to say whatever it is that they're feeling. Men act much more like the lord of the manor. Women act much more like people at court.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very true, and very, very, very interesting, because obviously has ramifications far beyond the realm of partisan politics. What do you suppose will happen over the next several years? Because there's going to be a lot of guys who are looking for romantic, partnership, but a lot of gals who are not interested in anyone who doesn't share their politics are going to be dismissing these guys. And then, of course, you have the decline in heterosexuality among females, although I don't know how legitimate that is, because I'm not of the opinion that anyone could change their sexual orientation. So, but anyhow, well, what do you think will happen with a lot of these guys who aren't going to be able to find female accompaniment? Or do you think maybe somehow they will be able to? Because if they're not, obviously this is going to cause an extreme problem in so-called society in the United States going forward.